Welcome to the Hello World podcast. My name is Sean Wildermuth and I'm your host. The Hello World podcast is where you can hear from some of your favorite developers, authors, and speakers about how they got started in this business. We go way back to their first computer, their first code experience, and their first job. Today I'm delighted to welcome Hadi Hariri. He's a software developer who currently works at JetBrains. His passions include web development and software architecture. He's written a few books and has been speaking at conferences for over a decade on things he is passionate about. I met Hadi way back at conferences, I don't know how many years ago now. I'll admit that we've shared a couple of adult beverages as well as been on some panels where we discussed the merits of web development versus Silverlight development, and we all know how that ended up. So let's take a listen at the conversation I had with Hadi. Well, today I'd like to welcome Hadi Hariri to the show. This is show number 7, which, everyone I talked to said, I don't think you're going to get past show number 3. So far we're doing pretty well. Welcome, Hadi.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Now you're
Not bad.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just recuperating from a cold, which is ideal while you're on vacation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you live in Spain, correct?
Yeah.
The lovely Spanish weather this time of year, or?
Well, yesterday it was pouring down with rain. Today it's really nice and sunny. It's like 18 degrees, which is great because technically we are in winter, right? We're not down under like the Australians that are in summer. We're in winter.
Correct.
So 18 Celsius, that is. So what is that, like in 80 Fahrenheit or something like that?
18 is around 78, I think, if my math is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So quite nice for Christmas.
For Christmas, yeah. So you did not have a white Christmas, I assume.
Oh, hell no. We're so far from white. My kids are like, when last time we went to Finland, they're like, it's like, yeah, we're going to see snow. I'm like, yeah. And one of them is like 10 years old. I've not seen snow before.
That's funny. Especially that you'd have to take them all the way to Finland just to see snow.
Yeah, I mean, we have a ski resort about 2 hours from us in Granada, which is Sierra Nevada, which is a very nice ski resort. Mm-hmm. But we don't ski, so we're not the skiing family. So, they went to Finland for snow.
I'm starting to imagine you as the Von Trapps, which I don't think is quite accurate.
Oh, yeah, right.
So let's talk about how you got started. Did you have a computer growing up? I mean, I know that your story is a little different than probably a lot of the Americans that are listening.
Well, I was growing up. My first wish was to have I think it was an Atari, and my dad never bought me an Atari. And I said to him, I really want a computer. But I didn't get a computer until I was around 8 years old, I think, something like that.
That's pretty young.
Because, yeah, but it was like, I mean, that was like, actually, no. I think I started begging at 8. I think I got my computer when I was around 10. Yeah, that was around 10. So, it took a couple of years of begging until I managed to finally get a computer. And yeah, I started back then. I was, my idea was, well, I'm not going to get an Atari, so let me get a computer and make my own games. And with the excuse of, this is for studying / learning, I would start to write my own games and then start playing with them. So after several years of begging, pleading, I finally managed to get a computer. I think my dad just did it to stop me nagging him all the time.
I could see that, actually, knowing you.
Thanks,
man. Nagging, yeah. What kind of computer was it?
Oh, I got a CPC 464.
I've never even heard of that. What? Oh, an Amstrad. Okay.
Yeah, that was like the cheap version of the Amstrad, because back then there was a CPC 464, which was this like long keyboard, and on the right hand side it had a cassette player with like colored buttons, and then you had the CPC 6128, I think it was, which had like the disc drive, so it was like the discs.
The giant 5 1/4 disc.
No, it had its own proprietary disc kind of thing.
Oh, really?
It was kind of like a 3.5. God, I can't even remember the small size. What did we have? We had 4 1/4. No, sorry, 5 1/4 and 3.5-inch floppies, right?
Yep.
Right. So this was more like the 3.5-inch floppies. But I didn't get that. I ended up with the 464.
The cassette.
Yeah, with the cassette player, which was great, because the alternative back then to having your own cassette player incorporated in the computer was to end up with, remember the Spectrum 48Ks?
Yes.
Yeah.
That awful
so you
machine.
so you had to plug in an external cassette player to that. But no, mine had like an inbuilt cassette player, and it came with its own color monitor. So that was like awesome. That was
wow.
wow.
Color.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was color.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And what did you program on that? I mean, what was the language? Was it BASIC?
Yeah, it was BASIC. So I started with the 10, print hello, 20, go to 10.
Sure.
And that after about the first hour watching that scroll by, I'm like, okay, I need to add some color to this, and having a color monitor, so I started to like make rainbows that you could have like each letter different, and soon I got bored of that, but of course I couldn't buy games, so I started to buy these computer magazines, and at the back of them, I don't know if you remember, but they used to actually like print out the entire code.
Yeah, I do. I remember typing them in and then spending, all this time finding out that there was a typo.
Yeah. Hooray for statically typed languages. So I used to just like sit there and type these things in and just like type them in, and that was it. And then I got a little bit bored of that, and that's when I kind of discovered that you could not only buy games, there were other ways of getting games, especially if you had a double deck cassette player. So yeah, well, we were in Spain, right? I mean,
that's true. And the statute of limitations is probably up.
Yeah. So, the games started suddenly going about, and then I fell in love with some of the games, and I spent like, summers on end just playing games.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you were playing games, but did you write? Is that where you really fell in love with writing software, or?
No. So what happened is that I was mostly my CPC started to become like a game console.
Sure.
I mean, I started to play a little bit, but I wasn't doing much with it in terms of programming. And then one year, a friend of mine, a guy that used to live in our complex. So in Spain, I guess it's European concept, but we have this thing called they call it urbanizations, which is like it's a group of houses together, right? So maybe like 10 or 100 houses. So in the urbanization I used to live, we used to have this closed circuit TV, which was basically giving it was like a teletext, but for only the houses.
Right.
And this was programmed with another computer. I can't remember. I think it was the PCW something. I can't remember. It was also an Amstrad. So the guy says to me, he's like, I'm going off to college, so do you want to take this over? And at that point, I think I was like 13 or something like that. And it was basically typing text, but you had to program the text, right?
Sure.
And that's when I started to get into the whole, this is actually quite cool, because I started to do something and see results and see how it was people were reading it and it was like useful for people, right? It wasn't just like, okay, I'm having fun playing games. So that's when I started to like get more into the aspect of, I can actually create something and, something useful.
And were you getting feedback in the community that, oh, you're doing a good job and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I started to get like, I met the president of the community there, and then she was like, yeah, this is cool. And then they said to me, we want you to like, we want to put in some advertising. And so we had like a rent-a-car that had like a play offices near our community. And
Sure.
they're like, we want you to put a logo of our car. And I'm like, okay, how do I do this? And it was like with pixels, right?
Right.
So I now had to write like, 10 pages of code to draw out a car. and then, they said, that's cool. Now you want our logo on there as well. So, and then it started to become more interesting. And then they like, okay, now we want a Christmas tree. And then I started to make like a Christmas tree that was like animated and stuff like that during the Christmas time. And it started to become a lot of fun. And at some point they're like, okay, this is starting to become hard work and we're going to start paying you for it. And then at that point I started to realize like, dude, I'm spending hours typing this stuff out, right? So also it was like during the time that the computers started to advance, right?
Sure.
And they went over to another one, which was the PC 1512. And I discovered Pascal.
Oh, nice.
So my second language was BASIC and went over to Pascal. And I said, instead of doing this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create like I wouldn't call it, back then it was like the early CRM. What I did is I created a text editor where they could actually like input text. And then, they would input text entries and then they would like give it a timing because they would approximately calculate the time based on the amount of text there was. So give like an average read time. And then, so the guy, I no longer had to type in the text. I made the program for them and then they just typed in the text. Of course, little did I know is that I just charged them for the program and then I wasn't getting my weekly income anymore because they started to do it all. I'm like,
Your first experience being a consultant, right? You're like, I should have charged.
I just shot myself in the foot, right? But that was like the first like official application that I made and I sold. Nice. And I actually literally wrote an entire editor, right? With the whole cursor movement and the whole copy and paste stuff and stuff. It was awesome.
Wow.
And this was in Pascal. This was I started to use Turbo Pascal for that. And then it was kind of like the time that I went to university. And then I started to get more into computers when I started, computer engineering or computer science.
And did you get a degree in computer science?
Well, I actually started in I went. My first year at university was aeronautical engineering. I wanted to be a pilot. My mother said, "I don't want you to spend your life flying in airplanes." I'm like, "Damn! Didn't I show her with racking 160,000 miles this year?" Huh?
Little did she know that.
Except I don't get to fly them. Yeah. So I wanted to be a pilot. That didn't work out. So I said, "Okay, well, I want to. I love airplanes. Everything to do about airplanes." So I said, okay, I'm going to go study aeronautical engineering. And I was meant to go to the US where my sister was at the time. She used to live in Boston. So I was going to go to down to Florida. There's a college called Embry-Riddle there, or Embry-Riddle. Unfortunately, later it became famous for the same place, I think, where the 9/11 guys went there. So that didn't work out. So I went to Madrid, ended up in the hardest university in Spain, where just so you get an idea, there was 500 students in the first year, right? So there was 4 classes of first year. And in the second year, there was only 2 classes with like 150 students.
Wow.
So the first year was just like a filtering process.
Yeah.
And I was there. I was like, I was first year away from home, just 19, 18 years old, 18 and a half, kind of like depressed, gloomy, used to live with this, pre-Civil War old lady that, allowed me to take a shower once a week with cold water in Madrid.
Wow.
And I didn't do very well. And so I said, I want to come back home. So I came back home and I went to study computer science in Malaga.
Oh, okay.
Which, I was doing a lot of programming, right? I
Sure.
mean, I started to do programming, but I never thought of doing like computer science as a degree. So it wasn't kind of like my first choice thing. It wasn't after my aeronautical engineering, then I went into computer science and did that for about 5 years and then started to work part-time while at university and just got full-time into that.
Did you have any early mentors that you were really, that really changed the way you thought about the work, whether that was in college or an early job?
No, I think I was very naive. My first official job kind of like, I started to dabble during university. I started to dabble into Clipper and DBase.
Mm-hmm.
And then for about 8 years, even before university, I started to help a charity that a lady that happened to be the president of the community, also where I was where I was living, mm-hmm. set up, which was a hospice. So I started to basically run their entire network and IT infrastructure, and I created DBase applications for them, and then I created Clipper applications for them, and I started to get into the database stuff. And then, after university, or near the ending years, when I got into my job, I got thrown into this job, and the guy is like, he says, you got 1 month to create an invoicing application. And I said, okay, I know C++. And they're like, well, we use Delphi. And I'm like, right. What? It's like Delphi. And I'm like, okay, what's that? It's like Pascal. I'm like, last time I touched Pascal, it was Turbo Pascal, and then it was Modular 2 in university. I'm like, I really like C++. But anyway, I started with Delphi. I did that. And he really he was grinding me. I mean, he really got work out of me, right? But he did push me. He really did push me to my limits, to the sense of, he made me, I a lot of time I was like, I'm not capable of doing this. And the way he kind of pushed me and in a way motivated me, he brought the best out in me that, proved to myself that I could do things that I thought I wouldn't be able to do. And, like pulling a invoicing application in a month without even knowing Delphi or anything like that back then. And it wasn't, it was good, but I wouldn't say that he was kind of like a mentor in the sense of software.
Sure.
But what I did find is that I was kind of foolish and naive in software development, because I mean, the way that I worked with this guy, it was kind of like, right, we need an invoicing program now. Right, we need to do this now. And in university, they are taught you kind of like these things of like, you have to do UML, and you have to do software design, and you have to do like the testing phase, the whole waterfall. And you come out and you're thrown into this world that none of that exists. And you kind of always, for many years, I was like hoping to go and work for like this large company like Microsoft, literally Microsoft, where they would do things right. Yeah. And it would be kind of like, we would sit and discuss for 7 months how to design software, and then write the specifications, and then, figure out how to implement it and do all that stuff. And little did I know that no, that's not really how it works in the real world. And
no. And little did you know you'd be, bad-mouthing Waterfall on Twitter every week as well.
Yeah, I know. But no, I was kind of disillusioned that, I thought that there was better ways to write software. And little did I know that, no, even the large companies, they weren't really doing it like that. And if they were just not doing it well. I mean, we saw that waterfall, like, it wasn't really that great after all. So I don't think that in my early years, to be honest with you, there wasn't anyone that I could consider a mentor or anything that I could anyone that I could look up to and say, oh, I want to follow in his steps. I want to follow, become like him or anything like that, which I guess kind of unfortunate because, maybe I would have learned a lot of mistakes or learned better ways sooner than I did. But
it's interesting because we've talked to a lot of people about different kinds of mentors. Some were, I like the way that this guy coded, or I like the way that this person, went about their work. But actually, your story is more common than you might imagine. In that, when we were talking to Chris Sells, he was talking specifically about that there was some guy that was just like, here, you're going to create a whole system and we expect it to be done in a week and a half, and you're going to be customer support, and you're going to install it, and you're going to, because that's what programmers do, which of course we now know is a whole different world.
Yeah. No, I mean, this first boss that I had, I think that he did show me some things in terms of business. I mean, I got to tell you, I worked with this guy for several years, and I think that one of the things that really helped me this job, not so much learning software development, not so much learning languages and writing applications and that, but it was learning to deal with customers, and learning to deal with some of the business aspects of software development, because it was like I during several months and during the whole years that I was working there, I was doing customer support as well, and we were like, apart from the software business, we were also an ISP. So we would do hosting and we would do dial-up internet. And I always tell this story. I'm like, I used to have to deal with customers that would call me screaming that they can't send and receive email. And you would say to them, right, look in your little tray icon at the bottom. Do you see those two little flashing lights that says you're connected to the internet? Are they there? And they would say, no, they're not. I'm like, well, can you, double click the browser to connect to the internet? No, I don't want to connect to the internet. I just want to send and receive email, right? This is the type of customers. I'm not joking. This is what we had to deal with. And I got an ulcer. I got an ulcer dealing with them. I got an ulcer dealing with the telephone companies in Spain when you used to call them and say, our frame relay is down. And they're like, but can you connect to the internet? And like, woman, we are a service provider, right? We are the service provider. We provide dial-ups for others. And, the incompetence of some of these companies. And it like burnt me inside, really a lot of frustration, but it also eventually taught me how to deal with customers and how to deal with people in a better way, and not to lose your temper and not to explode and stuff like that. And so in the aspects from a business perspective and customer relationships, I think that he was mentorish, I guess.
Sure,
you could say. He was a very good salesman. We always used to say that he could really sell ice to an Eskimo. I mean, he was really good. I mean, in terms of selling, but
that's interesting.
Not in terms of software.
What convinced you to leave that job? Did you decide that you wanted something different, or did you
No,
know?
it's very simple. My father died when we were 13.
Oh.
When I was 13. Didn't leave us in a very good financial situation. My mother wasn't working. My sister wasn't working. So my sister had to go to work and kind of support us. It wasn't easy. And it got to the point that, I needed to, while my mother wasn't telling me to, I saw that I needed to help.
Sure.
And I live in a town in Spain where if you're not in real estate, back in the days when there was the real estate boom, if you weren't doing carpentry, or if you weren't doing, plumbing and stuff, anything related remotely to construction or real estate work, there wasn't anything else.
Sure.
So this was like a once in a lifetime opportunity to actually work in software development that's what I wanted to do, and get paid for it. So that's why I took the job. Because there wasn't any other job. But to be fair, the guy treated me well. He, as I said, he pushed the best out of me. So for a couple of years I was there, and so it was good. But yeah.
And where did you move after that?
So then I moved to another company. I started to work remote. So back in 2001 is when I started to work remote. And apart from 1 year, ever since then, I've only worked remotely.
Interesting.
I started to work for a company in the US, which was doing reporting components for Delphi. So I was there for about a year, and then I moved on to another company, which was a friend of mine, which was doing web development components for Delphi. You might know him. I think you met Chad Hauer, right?
Yeah, that's name rings a bell. Yeah.
So he set up his company, which was A to Z, and we were doing IntroWeb, which was a web framework that was actually, it ships with Delphi. Since Delphi 7, it started to ship with Delphi.
Nice.
So I was working on that. And it's funny, I used to say, I said, I love working on the framework. I just don't believe so much in then that's the way to do web development, because it was very drag and drop kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of web forms things, which was like, no, you know me in web forms.
Yes. We've had our discussions about it.
Yeah. So I was doing that for a few years, and then I kind of started to make way into .NET. So back in, I think it was around 2005 or so, 2005, I started to port a lot of libraries that we had, both that and Indy, which was our internet. It was an open source project that I'd been working on since 2000, which was basically the RFC suites. Like, we had like 120 different components, SMTP, POP, MIME, FTP, you name it. So I started to port that over to Linux and to .NET. And so I started to get more involved in .NET, but from the Delphi side, not from the C# side.
Sure.
And then eventually I jumped ship from Delphi and went on to .NET. I started working more on .NET.
And so which side of the argument are you on around Delphi or Delphi? Because there's a big discussion.
Delphi.
Okay.
I'm always Delphi. I never say Delphi. I say Delphi, but I think it's the British that like Delphi, and the US like Delphi.
Yeah, I always knew it as Delphi, and then I went to a conference where there were a bunch of Delphi programmers, and a large argument ensued. I was fascinated by this,
Oh yeah, they were very passionate. They were very passionate. I tell you, I got into a lot of trouble with the guys at Borland back then, and not because of pronouncing it. I had a talk at some point at TechEd, and it was about Delphi. Because back then Delphi had like two libraries. It had the VCL and it had some other library, which was basically the equivalent of the VCL is kind of like the BCL in .NET, right?
Right.
And it was like components and that. And so it had another one, which was if you wanted to do cross-platform. And in this session, I basically said, guys, you've come to this session to learn about how to do .NET development with Delphi, but I can't stand up on stage and tell you guys that you should do .NET development with Delphi, because I think that honestly, taking this approach is a dead end. It's going to die. It's over, right? 1.5 years later, it was dead. It was over.
Yeah.
But then I got like blasted. There's a guy that unfortunately was in the, well, I don't care now, but he was in the room, Tim Anderson. I think you know his blog, IT Writing.
Yeah. So
he was in the room, and he went and he blogged how basically I had said, guys, jump ship if you want to do .NET, right? And I got David I. Do you know David I from Borland? He's like the top evangelist. David Inter Simone, great guy. And I was like, everyone got pissed off, and they're like, you know, who needs friends when we've got, who needs enemies when we have friends like you? And I'm like, guys, you're blind to the obvious, you know. I mean, I'm not, it's just you did it wrong. You were 5 years too late. Just let it go, which eventually they did.
Sounds like my experience with Silverlight, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to bring that up. It's not like I didn't tell you, man. But I wasn't going to rub that. I was going to say, it kind of reminds me of that when I was talking to. Oh, yeah, sorry. So
yeah, I'm not going to rehash that whole conversation, but it's interesting because I didn't realize that you had spent so much time in sort of the Clipper and Delphi world. I never got into Delphi because I had a bad early experience with Borland and swore off them forever. Years and years and years ago, pre-Delphi. So I luckily or unluckily never fell into that, but I spent a lot of time in that Clipper space writing, for these little companies, and it's very interesting how that does shape how you deal with customers. I've worked with some people who leave university with a computer science degree, and they think sort of like you do that, the way you write software is this, sort of rigorous thing. And then they get out and they go, well, we have to keep the lights on, and we just got this contract, and the salesman who doesn't know anything about software has now promised 12 things that may be impossible, but we now need you to make it work. And that's, much more common.
Go ahead, sorry.
And I find it interesting because it is in those larger companies you kind of assume, oh, this is the way it works. But in most large companies, they have these little fiefdoms, these little groups that act like, that have the same dynamics as many small companies, in that, oh, we just have to get this working, and I can't do this as my full-time job, so I'm just going to, use Access to build it. And then, it's strange how all this software that runs our world, if we go behind the scenes, it's kind of ugly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the largest, transport companies, like the I'm not going to name the names, but like the courier companies in Spain are like using a centralized FTP server, and each shop basically is zipping up a file, dumping it, FTPing it over to this server, and then that server is processing it, dumping it into another folder where some other shop connects to, transfers the file over, unzips it, and that's how they get their their parcels from one place to another. The request, and you're thinking like, how the hell do they actually deliver anything like this? It's like the bottleneck is a single server, and you would think that these systems are like, wow, but no, it's all just like, just like one big hack on another big hack on another big hack,
just cobbled together.
Yeah,
I like to tell the story. Years ago, I was working in medical software, and we were trying to figure out a way to connect to a lab system. So doctors would say, oh, you need a blood test. They take the blood and they send it to a lab, and the lab sends it back results. And we wanted to try to streamline that, so we went to see how it worked. And the doctors would have this tiny little terminal in their offices, and they would type, or really their staff would type the tests they need. Okay, we need a cholesterol test or whatever it is, and they would have a courier come and pick up the sample. And when we went to the lab company, what they were doing was taking the little things the doctor's offices were typing and printing them out, and they'd walk across the room, and a tech would then type it into another system that would allow them to do the test. And then when that was done, they would print it out again and walk across the room and type it back in the system that connected with the doctor. So, in medicine, transposition can kill people, right? It's this, the simple act of someone having to type it twice. I'm like, this is really dangerous. I'm never getting another test in the doctor's office ever until we fix this, because this is just, super dangerous. It's just amazing because, it's so much of the way the world works today.
Yeah. I know it's crazy. I mean, we have these, and still, people graduate from university today and they come out and they think, oh, yep, no, that's not what I expected.
No.
Even today, but I think that one of the biggest advantages that I had was being early on exposed to some of the business aspects of things. Having worked in a small company and dealing that, you got to pay the bills, and I think every software developer, every developer should at some point have to run their own company, because they need to balance things and they need to realize that not everything is, because it's very easy to do the right thing all the time when you're not paying the bills, right?
Yeah.
when making that, whatever change or whatever better way to do it. And, and this is coming from me, that I vouch for refactoring code and cleaning out stuff and getting rid of code smells and all that. But there's a time and place, and there's a limit, and there's a balance. And it's very easy to sit there and judge others and, pass judgment when it's not coming out of your paycheck. Right. It's and I think that a lot of us, a lot of developers don't really realize this, don't appreciate that there is a customer involved. There is a way to speak to customers. There is a customer is always right kind of thing. There is truth to that. And so that for that, I'm fortunate, I think.
Yeah.
Having dealt with customers in that sense.
I would agree. They're always right, except when they won't connect to the internet, right?
Huh?
They're always right, except when they don't want to connect to the internet to send emails.
Except when they don't want to connect. But I'm guessing for you it's the same. I mean, most people that are consultants have the same issue. I mean, you got to deal with the customers. You've got to deal firsthand with customers.
Well, what I find fascinating is, early on, I sort of got into this business, and I knew a lot of other guys who got into this business because they didn't really like people. They kind of thought that this business was, you're going to put me in a dark room with a bright screen and I'm going to type all the time and all of that sort of deal. And I found that once I got into the business, that half of it was dealing with people. Half.
Yeah.
It's not just 80-20 or other numbers. Half of the time I spent in my first 20 years in this business was sitting in a room with customers going, what do we do wrong? Or what do you want us to build? Or explain your business so we can figure out how to make it better. I mean, it's when it comes down to it, we spend a lot of time with people, and so we need those people skills. And to me, the worst developers aren't the ones that take shortcuts. They're the ones that don't know how to listen. Listening is way more important than knowing. When people interview developers and I ask them how to do, write on the board a bubble sort, that's way less interesting to me than, do you know how to actively listen to someone and tell me what I just said. Were you listening, or were you already thinking about what you were about to say?
Exactly, because in fact, when a lot of times that happens, even to myself, even to that the customer is explaining to you something, and you've already disconnected from the customer and thinking about how you're going to solve that problem that he's just talked about.
Yep.
Without fully listening to what the hell he's trying to say.
That it's a skill that and it is a skill. It isn't. Yeah. It's something that everyone can learn.
It's funny you bring that up, because I'm and this is a personal plug, so you can censor this out if you want. But I'm actually this week that I'm meant to get my next Pluralsight course out.
Oh, nice!
Which is exclusively about this topic. It's about communication and kind of people skills in software development. So I'm wondering, how many people are going to listen to that one?
Well, let's hope. I'll make sure and get a plug on the website for it, because I'm always
which is kind of like a commitment that I got to get it done as well.
That's true. Absolutely. So thanks for joining us. This is the 7th episode of the Hello World podcast. Thanks a lot.